Well, tonight I want to just jump in real quick, and I want to look at a passage of Scripture tonight. Here's a moment, if you go on a journey with me, there's a moment in Scripture, many of us would have heard about kind of this journey that takes place of kind of Moses frees a whole bunch of people, takes them through a wilderness, and then Joshua takes them on to the Promised Land, and then the Promised Land is then conquered by Joshua and his people. And tonight I want to look at this moment. Once they've kind of conquered the land, Joshua then takes the 12 tribes and he starts to divide the land up amongst the 12 tribes. And he divides the land up depending on the size, the scale of each tribe, and he gives them an allotment that he feels, and with the eldership, they feel that God is leading this whole process, that he feels is a God allotment to those people for the land that he promised. All right, you with me? Haven't lost you already? All right, there's the moment. And then there's these two tribes, the tribes of Joseph. These two tribes come back to Joshua because they got given an allotment, and then they go and scout out their allotment, and then they come back to Joshua because they're unsettled and unhappy with what they were given. All right, anyone ever been like that on Christmas morning? So you unwrap your presents, okay. See who the favorite child is now. You know, there's this moment where it's like they look at what they have, and there's this dissatisfaction, and they turn to Joshua, and it says this, this in Joshua 17, just pick it up in verse 14, it says, the people of Joseph said to Joshua, why have you given us only one allotment and one portion for an inheritance? We are a numerous people, and the Lord has blessed us abundantly. The Lord has blessed us abundantly. I was reading some stuff around this scripture, and it's quite interesting, just to pause here, this moment, how they say, he has blessed us. Then one writer believes they didn't say he is blessing us. He said he has blessed us. And there's one train of thought, one commentary that believes that they could look back and see that God's blessing was on them, but as they look to their future, they didn't have the same level of faith that what God was with them then, will God be with me now? Like God blessed me, but will God continue to bless me? And so then they're unsure of that. So they go back to Joshua because they're like, well, God moved here, but now I need to try and make something happen here. And I don't know, I've even found in my lifetimes like that. Where it's like, it's easy to look back at what God has done and go, man, God is so good. But then I look to my future, and it's easier to have thanksgiving towards the blessing that was than faith for the blessing to come. And so when I'm thankful for what God has done, but now it's my hustle. Like now I've got to make it happen. Like I thank you, God, but now, and there's this tribe that's gone, man, God, thank you so much. But now we've just got to make something. So they come back to Joshua, and then this is Joshua's response. If you are so numerous, Joshua answered, and the hill country of Ephraim is too small for you, go up to the forest and clear the land for yourselves. In verse 16, it says, the people of Joseph replied, the hill country is not enough for us. And all the Canaanites who live there in the plain have chariots fitted with iron, both those in Beth-shan and its settlements, and those in the valley of Jezreel. We got there? That's right, Jezreel. But Joshua said, this is what I want to look at. But Joshua said to the tribes of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, you are numerous and very powerful. You will not only have one allotment, but the forest hill country as well. Clear it, and its farthest limits will be yours. Though the Canaanites have chariots fitted with iron, though they are strong, you can drive them out. There's this moment, this passage, this picture that's taking place where these two tribes look at their allotment, look at the size of their nation, and then they look over the fence, and they look at what everyone else got, and they're like, hey, well, if we're so big and we're so strong, why did we get that? Look, their land just looks so much nicer. Like their grass is just so much greener. Like it just seems so much easier for them. I need to try and get what they have. Like my answer is to try and get hold of what they have. So they go back to try and take hold of what somebody else's has, because there's this moment where they look at their land, and what they realize about their land is it's going to take a fight and it's going to take work. But I thought it was the promised land. Like I thought the promised land was going to be more like Hawaii, more like just beach and poolside. And they've bought into this idea that the promised land was easy and luxurious, and that there wasn't a fight and a battle in it. And so they look at their land and they conclude, well, this mustn't be right, because there's still a fight and there's still work to be done. I need what they have, because it just seems so much easier. And I think sometimes we buy into this idea like the promise of God is just easy and luxurious. Like I'm doing this God thing right when I can just kick my feet up and chill. Like I'm doing this whole thing right when it's just easy. Like I'm doing by the gate right when just like 100 people turn up. That's when I'm doing it right. But why it's just me and 3 people and we're fighting, we're believing, we mustn't be doing it right. Because this is work and a fight. And they're convinced that they'll be in the right place when it's luxurious and easy. But I don't know if you've read the New Testament. I don't know if you looked at the life of Jesus, who modeled humanity in his greatest form. It wasn't that luxurious, and it wasn't that easy. He promises luxury is going to come. There's a time for luxury, but even here and now, there's a fight and a work to do. But so often we try and we think if there's a fight and work, I'm doing it wrong. And so they come back to Joshua, and they look across the fence, and there's a dissatisfaction with what they have in the situation they're in. So they are convinced that fulfillment is going to come from taking hold of something else. They're convinced of the idea that fulfillment is outside of them. Like promise is outside of them. Fullness of life is outside of them. And they end up trying to chase after something they don't need, and they miss exactly what they have. And I think sometimes even in my life, I found myself, I chase after things I don't need, and I don't take a hold of the things I have right here. And the enemy will just love us to get busy chasing after things we don't need. Well, to live a full life, to live a full life, to live a blessed life, you need to chase after all of this. Because if he can get you chasing what you don't need, he can take your eyes off what you actually have. The access you have. The full life that God can give you in the situation, in the lot, in the life you're in. And we get caught up. I remember as a kid, I attended the 40-hour famine. And it was a bad idea. And I was never going to last 40 hours on barley sugars. But I also have older siblings. And I remember the first day, start the 40-hour famine, you start with like good intentions. I'm going to help a whole lot of people. I don't know how, but that's what the school told me. And so I'm there, and I start in the morning, and my brother from breakfast, because he didn't do it. So from breakfast, he was just on me. Man, this breakfast is so good. It's just so good. And then by morning tea, he's just sitting in the lounge, just eating right in front of me. And then at lunchtime, he's eating. And then we hear family friends are coming over. And he comes over to me, he goes, oh man, they always bring good food. Like, as kids, we didn't go out a whole lot. So he's like, I reckon they're going to bring KFC. Like, I reckon they will. Like, I heard, and he's like, I heard Mum say on the phone, oh, yeah, just bring some KFC. Like, she didn't at all. But he's trying to, because he's like, his whole thing was to get me to quit. And then in about the afternoon, I went to Mum and I was like, hey, you know how I was doing the 40-hour famine? I meant to say I was actually doing the 10-hour famine. And so by dinner time, I'm good to eat again. Because he had convinced me that KFC was coming. And then I tell everyone I'm finished the famine. I've done my 10 hours, high five. And that was awesome. And then the family friends turn up, and they had bought this stew. And I'll never forget it because I was so disappointed. I was just so disappointed. I remember eating it and just thinking like, oh, what have I done? What have I done? But it was this idea of like, sometimes we get this picture like, there's greater stuff out there. There's more I need to chase, and there's more I need to go after. Instead of actually stopping for a moment and thinking, man, what do I actually already have access to? Because here's these people that are convinced that fulfillment is found in taking hold of what somebody else has. You see, there's a map actually, just so you can see the land. The Manasseh tribe, this is the allotment of land. On this side of the Jordan, half the tribe stayed. But you look how big the allotment is. And then look how big Ephraim is. Like, compared to the other little guys. And like, they're looking over the fence going, man, if we had what they had, we'd be sussed. But not realizing actually what they already had. They actually had the largest allotment of land. They actually already had it all. They had full access to it. And so Joshua turns, they come to this point where what they were really disappointed in, not the size of the land when you get down to it, just the packaging the land came in. Because all the other land seemed easier. But theirs was packaged in forest and chariots. Theirs was packaged in trees and chariots. And the promise wasn't packaged in the way they thought it would be packaged. And so they come back to Joshua saying, surely Joshua's a good guy. Surely he'll understand. But what I love about Joshua is they present a problem. And all he really does is turn the problem back onto self-responsibility. And that's the worst. Like when you go to complain to somebody about someone and then they like get you to realize that it's actually your problem. Like that's not what I came here for, right? I didn't come to own my life and own my situations, all right? I just came to let you know there's a problem and it's not my problem. It's your problem. And he just flips it straight back on them. Because what he says is if you would clear the land, and you would clear the forest and you'd drive out the chariots, the farthest limits could be yours. Like, do you realize what you have? But if you actually just worked it, if you actually just cleared it, if you actually just fronted some stuff, if you actually faced up, if you actually dug deep. And, I was reading about one writer that would say the danger is a generation being raised that would rather beg than dig. I'd rather just ask for it than allow the grace and the goodness of God to teach me how to work for it, take hold of it. And what I really want to look at is there's three kind of mentalities that I believe the people that when they approach Joshua struggle with. The first is they would rather avoid the fight than take the territory. They'd rather avoid the fight than take the territory. Avoidance is something we all love. It's comforting to just avoid things, let's be honest. But the reality is the problem isn't that God hasn't given them an allotment. It's just that they're wanting to avoid having to actually work the land, work themselves, dig deep. And, I don't know about you, but have you ever presented a problem that's not truly the problem? Like you don't want to say what the real problem is, so you pitch a false problem. Like it's like someone asks you like, hey, we should go get a feed. You're like, I'm busy. They're like, oh, no, you're not. Oh, I don't have a ride. Oh, I'll come pick you up. You're like, mate. And then you're like, oh, I've got no money. The problem was you had no money. But you were just, that's the whole reason. That's how some of you ended up in church this afternoon. Someone was like, hey, you should come to church. And really, you're like, no, I really don't want to. But instead of saying you don't want to, because that's rude, you're like, oh, I can't get a ride. They're like, oh, I'll come get you. Oh, Mum said I'm not allowed. I got a family thing on. I just spoke to your family. You're all good. And you're like, okay, I'll get in the car. The problem wasn't the problem, but we present a problem. And this is how the story plays out between Joshua and the people, because they present, hey, the land's not big enough. Joshua's like, no, it is big enough. Just go cut the trees down. They're like, yeah, but there's actually chariots between us and the trees. And he's like, oh, so the problem isn't the trees and that you don't fit. The problem is that you're afraid to fight. Because you believe God blessed you, but you don't believe God will continue to bless you. So I better try and get what they've got instead of take hold of what God has for me. And there's this avoidance. And, that's why some of us don't want to go to Encounter, let's be honest. Because, I love talking to some leaders after some rev, some young people. They're like, man, I knew if I come to some revolution, God was going to bring that up. It's like, I'd rather not go because then God doesn't bring it up. But then you're never going to experience the fullness of life. You're never going to experience the fullness of what God has for you. God only brings things up for your good. So he can work it, so he can help you, he can build on it, he can move you forward. But so often we'd rather just avoid and we present problems that aren't problems and church is just a bit hard to kind of find. And so that's why I don't come. Come on, let's be honest, it's not that hard. The real reason isn't that. You just feel bad about yourself and you don't want to be in this environment. But we just project false problems. But God's like, come on, let's not avoid. Come on, let's not avoid. Let's not run from. When we have a whole allotment of life God has given us, and let's not run after other things. Let's take hold of what God. The second thing is, they were convinced what they had. They convinced what they have is better than what they were. Oh, sorry, here we go. They were convinced. I was like, who wrote this thing? They were that guy needs to go back to school. They were convinced what they had was better than what I have. We've already talked about this, so I won't go on it too long, but they were convinced what they had. And, the whole thing is that a lot of people, pray for larger, pray for more. I just need to take hold of. One writer said this: many wish for larger possessions who do not cultivate and make the best with what they actually have. That instead of actually praying for more, why don't I pray, God, help me steward what you're giving me? It's like I'm praying for a new job, but the way I treat my current job, but potentially it's not the job. Potentially it's the way you're approaching the job. Now I'm praying for promotion, but maybe it's not the promotion. Maybe it's just turning up on time, serving. And if you would cultivate and you would work with what you have. See, I can't work with what I don't have. I can only work what I have. But if I were, the promise of God and the principle of God tells us, if we were to be faithful with what we have, if we would just be diligent, if we would just work the land we'd have, God would bring the enlargement. God would bring the fullness. God would bring the abundance. But instead we're convinced that what they have is better than what I have. Yet people in different families, people brought up in different situations, but you're not going to experience the fullness of God comparing yourself and trying to take hold of, well, if I just had what they had, then I'd be doing what they're doing. Perhaps not. Because would you worked what they had? The way they worked what they had. And there's a lot of people doing a lot, one of the most humbling things, Pastor Sam, I've heard him say, and it made me sit in my seat, is, there's people doing a lot more with a lot less. I was like, that's not what I want to hear. There's people doing a lot more with a lot less. But they were approached with this mentality, and the other way they approached was when they thought, what they thought was their problem was actually their answer. So they thought the fact they were so numerous was their problem. But the fact they were so numerous was actually their answer. Because Joshua turns around to them and says, you are numerous and powerful. Actually, having a whole lot of people isn't your problem. It's being able to utilize the whole lot of people you have to be able to move forward is actually the answer, is actually the thing that will move you forward, is actually. And the whole thing is they just looked at what they had with the wrong perspective. That perhaps my problem isn't my problem. Perhaps my current problem is an answer to a bigger solution, a bigger problem. That's what we love about the story of like David and Goliath. Goliath wasn't a problem. Goliath was a solution to a shepherd boy establishing victory in front of an army of people to gain the respect. Goliath was a solution, not a problem. He was God's grace towards David. Actually, you're a shepherd boy that nobody cares about. I'm going to put you in a fight that you can win. And instead of complaining about Goliath, often we complain, God, take away Goliath. Take away my giant. Well, how many of your giant is God's grace? God's grace right now. Because he wants you to find victory over Goliath so then you can find victory in a bigger battle. And sometimes we just got the wrong perspective. Come on, there. It's for some of you, especially you got students, that financial situation. Well, that's God's grace right now. I'm going to teach you how to steward here. So then you learn how to steward here. Maybe just God raining buckets of money down on you won't actually help you. But it's God's grace for you to find greater victory. For you to find greater victory. And they really what they had was they came to Joshua with avoidance, comparison, and wrong perspective. But avoidance, comparison, and wrong perspective are all things that are going to rob you. Rob you of tapping into the fullness of what God has for you. The life God has for you. What it is, rob them of the realization of what they have. Am I getting a bit sweaty? That's a subtle hint right there. Yeah. Thanks, Ian. At least somebody's looking out for me. Hey, yeah. I love Joshua's response though, because his response wasn't just go and do a whole lot of things. His first response is, you are numerous and strong. The way Joshua responded was not, hey, this is what you need to do. He just responded and said, hey, just remember who you are. Just remember. They come complaining, what are we going to do? It's not big enough. What are we going to do? There's a whole lot of work. There's Canaanites. He goes, hey, just remember. Remember who you are. Remember who's with you. Remember who's fighting with you. Remember who brought you here. That's why I love Ephesians 3:20, because at the end of it, how it says, well, now to him who's able to do immeasurably more than we're able to ask or imagine, according to the power that is work within us. It's a work that's working in us. Just remember who's working in you. Come on, your challenges, the trees and chariots in your world right now, the trees and chariots taking up space in your life that you feel like are in your way. Come on, remember who's in you. Remember who's at work in you. So often we in church, and for us that have been around church for a little while, we get caught up in this. It's easy to just get in a routine of things we say, like, God, I love you. It's kind of like, I grew up with siblings, like I said, so like, as siblings do, they hurt each other. I don't know why, this is how it is. And then like mum would be like, so sorry. And you're like, sorry. And then you walk on. Like you say it, but you don't mean it. Because you're just in routine of saying it. Because that's just what we do. We hurt each other and say, sorry, so sorry. So, and then every now and again, you'd have to sit down at the table. And then, hey, I need you to mean it. Okay, I'm sorry. But so often it's just like, I love you, God. Oh, yeah, God, you're with me. Oh, yeah, I heard that on Sunday, God. Your promises never fail. But there's actually got to be times where you stop and sit and remember, God is with me. God is in me. God has promises for me. God has future with me. God has a life for me. But so often we just rush over these things. And I've come to realize some of the biggest shifts in my life haven't come from new revelation. It's just come from a deeper revelation about the same truth. I remember being a 16-year-old, year 12 at high school, who kind of got fired up for Jesus and had all the passion and none of the direction. And I wasn't part of a youth ministry that knew how to cultivate somebody like that. And so I sat down with a friend, Jesse, and he was year 11, and we were like, we've got to do something for Jesus in our school. And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and we're pretty untalented bunch of people, and so we go, what do we know to do? And we were the games and giveaway guys at youth. And so I was like, all right, we know how to do games and giveaways. And so what we did is in our church, we found these old orange overalls, and we came up with this idea. And the worst thing is our youth pastor was involved in it. And so I was like, why didn't you direct this a bit better? And we came up with this idea that we're gonna do something in our school, and we're going to invite our whole school to youth. And so we find these orange overalls. And what I do is I write a letter, write it out with terrible English, but I write it out, and I walk up and down the main street of our town, knock on all the shops. Hey, can you give me some free stuff? I want to give it away at my school because I want to do something in there. And I'm like, yeah, sure. I got like a GHD hair straightener. And that's back in the day when they were like new. And I got Subway hooked me up. Like I got prizes and prizes, all right? And what we do is we get to school, and we're period for lunch is about to start. We had organized all these games we could run and just throw hair straighteners and Subway at people. And we're in the bathroom, and then we're standing there, me and Jesse, and there's this moment that happens. Our youth pastor is there as well, and Jesse kind of looks at me, says, hey, you kind of know what this moment is, eh? I'm like, yeah, scary one. And he's like, it's kind of a never turn back moment for us. He's like, once we go to these doors, everyone's going to know we love Jesus. Everyone's going to know. And he's like, you up for it? Yeah. And I was like, you up for it? Yeah, let's do it. And then we run out, we have whistles, fight in the quad. And I'm fighting for your souls. And we get up on the picnic table and running game. We're doing our thing. And we do it about 3 times in 3 consecutive weeks. And we give out all this free stuff. And to be honest, no one really came to youth. Like, everyone came for the free stuff. And that's what we needed at youth, free stuff. Anyway, and I remember reflecting on that and going, God, what was that all about? Because I really felt something there. And he goes, oh, it wasn't so much, what I really felt just as a teenager, it wasn't so much for them, it was more for you. And I can track back kind of my journey of God, and I'd say that was a life-defining moment for me. You just want to say, I just wanted to know if you're willing to step out. And trust me, and love me, and take a step of faith. All those things I'd heard all my life, they became a whole lot more real, though, when I took a step of faith. Same thing I'd heard my whole life, but at a deeper level. And that's what I've just found with God. It's just gone deeper and deeper. And I've found as my belief gets deeper, my life gets larger. It just is what it is. That actually my job is not to try and get my life larger. My job is just trying to get deeper into God's presence, deeper understanding of Him, a deeper revelation, a revelation that cuts out my reasoning. You know how sometimes you got great reasoning, but then God gets you a revelation that just cuts through it all? So annoying. But it just goes deeper. And I reckon for some of us, it was like for the tribe, it was they were like, we are so numerous. And Joshua was like, yeah, you are numerous. They're like, we didn't put that together. The fact we got heaps of people means we could do this thing. And we hear scriptures. Greater is he who is in me than he who's in the world. We're like, oh yeah, sorry, Mum. And we just treat it like that. But if you would just allow to take time and just take a moment and let God just develop deeper into your life, your perspective will change on everything. Your fullness of life will develop, it will grow, it would move forward. The enlargement of my lot starts with the enlargement of me. The enlargement of my lot doesn't start by what others give me, the opportunities I get presented, the things around me. The enlargement of my life starts with an enlargement in me. If I would get bigger, if I would go deeper, my life would be fuller and go further. See, the biggest reason, just to finish here, if keys want to come, the problem wasn't that they were too big for the allotment. The problem was just that the allotment was full of other things. The allotment was just full of trees and chariots. And instead of addressing the trees and chariots, they'd rather just try and live in a smaller world. And we're talking about the fullness of life and abundance life. For that to take place, sometimes there's trees and chariots that we need to address, we need to go after, we need to work. Instead of just avoiding it and living smaller, that I actually remember who's in me, who's with me. God has called me. God has chosen me. I grew up a Christian kid. The amount of times someone has said, God has a plan and a purpose for your life, I couldn't count. But also the amount of times I didn't believe God had a plan and purpose for my life. I'd heard it, but wouldn't believe it. And there's just times where you got to stop and let the revelation of what we say and what God is saying sink deeper. And the deeper God can go in your life, the larger your world will become. But sometimes we're just in this rush. We're just rushing. It's like, on to the next, on to the next. I remember getting my driver's license, and I was definitely one of the E is enough kind of people. The main reason is because I'd just get bored at the gas station. But the real reason was because I didn't have money. But the reason I'll tell you, and so what I'd do is I'd always fill up enough to get to where I was going, but never really think to what was beyond that point. And we'd just get enough to get here. Okay, get enough to get here. Get enough to get here. Just that's how I was living. My claim to fame, though, is I ran out of gas one day, about 100 meters from the gas station, and I managed to put my foot on the clutch and roll to the gas pump. I was like, I timed that perfect. Just perfect. The problem is, some of us kind of treat God like that. Just like, I'm in a rush, I'll just get enough to here, and I'll just get enough to here. And then there's somebody over here that's just filling up, going deep, getting revelation. And then you're over here and you're looking back and say, why is their world getting bigger? Why does their life seem so more fulfilled? It's not because they got given anything you didn't get given. It's because they just allowed the time to dig deep into what God was doing. They just allowed time. Some of you are like me, even this afternoon. You just rolled in here on E. You're just lucky you ran out of gas in the right place. There's so many people that run out of gas in the wrong place. And then you just get a pump from anybody. Honestly, I've been there. I ran out of gas in my early days a few times. It was just like, hey man, have you got 20? Have you got a gas can? And knock on farmers' doors. Because we're not filling up. And then we end up filling our life with other things. And then we end up going, God, why is my life not full? God, why is my life not abundant? It's because you didn't take the time to go deep. Because the deeper you go, the deeper the revelation, the greater the perspective. The realization God loves you and God is for you will cause you to not want to avoid anything, but allow God into everything. The realization that God has a plan and purpose for your life that's going to blow your mind will cause you not to care really about what they're doing. God's got a plan for me. The deeper we go, the larger God can take us.